Hello, my friends. I hope you had a great weekend. I have an awesome conversation with JL Cauvin coming up. We cover a lot. It's great, as always. Funny, hilarious, smart, thought-provoking. I always love his views. And that is coming up at 23 minutes if you want to jump ahead and skip the news. But I hope you don't. I hope you stay here for it. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you had a great Father's Day. Thanks to all the dads who responded to my invitation about joining me for a Father's Day special, which, yes, I'm putting it together after Father's Day, but it is always relevant. I hope that I'll get something out to you guys this week. And thanks so much for your interest. I hope you heard my conversation with Eric Siegel that I posted on Saturday. We had a great about 20 minutes about dadding, about being dads, and then we got into the latest on the Supreme Court. There'll be more decisions coming this week, so brace yourself for that. I've got your headlines and what else is coming up this week coming at you right now. Some sound bites, a whole bunch from the Sunday shows. That's what we do. And listener Dan Leaf texted me, and this is why I do the news. He says, I always have loved your reading headlines and news before the interviews, and now the audio clips have taken it to an even better level. This text is just to reinforce the fact that I love the fuck out of it. I also find your vocal time inserts funny for when something begins. Okay, well, thank you very much, Dan, for reaching out. You're very kind, and these news headlines are forever going to be the Dan Leaf Memorial headlines, even though Dan is very, very alive. So to Dan and everybody else that enjoys and gets a lot out of the headlines and news segment, let's do it right now. Here's what happened over the weekend. There was a 2-day summit in beautiful Switzerland that was dedicated to forging a path forward to the end of the war in Ukraine. That concluded with key powers spurning a joint communique agreed to by more than 80 other countries and international organizations in support of Ukraine. Scores of countries at this 2-day summit joined Ukraine. The vice president was there herself, Kamala Harris. At the end of the meeting, most of the delegations signed onto a statement of shared principles like promoting prisoner exchanges and nuclear safety. And the document reaffirmed the signatories' commitment to, quote, refraining from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, the principles of sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all states, including Ukraine, within their internationally recognized borders. The president, Volodymyr Zelensky, told journalists at a news conference alongside the leaders of many of these countries that it was, quote, important that all participants of this summit support this Ukraine's territorial integrity because there is no lasting peace without that. All right. Well, that was a pretty big deal at that summit over the weekend. And now, in the meantime, the disgraced former President Donald Trump blasted the scale of U.S. support for Ukraine, said if he's reelected in November, he'd immediately, quote, have that settled. At a campaign rally in Detroit, he criticized the Ukrainian president, calling him the, quote, greatest salesman of all time for his ability to secure U.S. support and defend Ukraine against Russian aggression more than 3 years after Moscow's all-out invasion. So that is the different sides of the coin. That is what at stake in America's presidential election. And there was a big fundraiser for President Biden over the weekend. The splashy Hollywood fundraiser on Saturday raised more than $30 million, a big boost at a time when the disgraced former guys started to catch up to Biden's fundraising. You had Jimmy Kimmel in conversation with Biden and Barack Obama. You had Barbara Streisand, Julia Roberts, George Clooney, and I'll get some sound to you for that. But the president lit into the conservative Supreme Court as so far out of step with America, warned that the stakes of the election were very high for the court if Trump wins. Obama slammed Trump for his criminal convictions, and meanwhile, in Michigan, Trump veered between an adoring crowd at Turning Point Action Conference in Detroit and a more reserved reception at a, quote, black church. It's being called a black church because it's mostly a black church, except for when Trump is in it. It was filled with white people and Ben Carson. And that is where, by the way, the disgraced former president demanded there be a cognitive test for Joe Biden while getting the name of his actual doctor who conducted the cognitive test on him wrong. And I'll play that stupid clip for you in the sound bites as well. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the weekend signaled he was surprised by his military, saying that it would pause daytime operations in an important aid corridor. Military officials emphasized that the Rafah offensive would continue, but Netanyahu said he didn't know about plans to pause fighting. Analysts said he probably approved of them, so he's trying to have it both ways. Disgusting. Israel announced this daily pause in fighting near a key Gaza border crossing. Aid groups welcome the pause in fighting, but say Israel must do more to ease hunger. And Muslims in Gaza said there won't be any Eid, the holiday, the great Muslim holiday that started over the weekend. There won't be any Eid because Gazans are finding little to celebrate, is what you're hearing from them. Let's see, what else do I have for you? The House passed an $895 billion defense policy bill that would restrict abortion access and transgender medical care in the military. The Senate will almost certainly leave those measures out of its version of the bill, so we'll see if that gets to the president for him to sign. Millions of Americans from Texas to Maine are going to face intense heat this week. Coming up this week, headlines. I mentioned Eid al-Adha, the major Muslim holiday, began yesterday. You had the Tony Awards yesterday. This Wednesday, it's Juneteenth. Men's Fashion Week is beginning in Paris. That's a thing. And the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, begins in the northern hemisphere on Thursday. Those are the headlines. They feel minimal. I feel like I should have more for you on a Monday show, but that's what I gathered. And now it's time to get to the sound clips that I've got for you. First, let's just get this out of the way. This is the disgraced former president calling for a cognitive test while getting the name of his former doctor wrong. No big deal, I guess.
Dr. Ronnie Johnson. Does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas? He was the White House doctor. And he said I was the healthiest president he feels in history. So I liked him very much. Of
course, that doctor's name was Dr. Ronnie Jackson, right? He got that wrong. All right. Now I've got to go to Tim Scott. He was on ABC's This Week with Jon Carroll. First, here he is being corrected on violence. The question we constantly hear from Republicans, how terrible violence has been under Biden, but we've just learned from the FBI that violent crime has gone down across the board in almost every place in many, many metrics.
Under Joe Biden, we've seen the movement to defund the police, leaving communities like the one I grew up in devastated and ravaged by a wave of violent crime that we have not seen literally in 5 decades.
Actually, Senator, as you probably know, the latest stats on violent crime and on the murder rate, they're actually down this past year. But let me get back to my question about the Supreme Court's decision.
Well, let's take a look at those. Let's take a look at those crime rates. We've seen over 4,000 shootings just in the city of Chicago. We've seen a spike in violent crime. It's nice to see something plateau, but the fact of the matter is simple. Under Joe Biden, neighborhoods like the ones I grew up in have never been ravaged. Grandmothers like the one that raised me are trapped in their houses from the time the sun goes down until it comes up again.
So to my question, though, on bump stocks.
Yeah, the question was about bump stocks, by the way. I didn't even mention that at the beginning. He asked him about bump stocks. Of course, he didn't answer it, and he just made up statistics and said that people are people trapped in their houses? They won't even go outside. Is that true? I don't know. In his old neighborhood, I'd love to hear from some of those people. Maybe I must be missing that. Now let's go to CBS's Face the Nation, where Margaret Brennan had Congressman Mike Turner on. And some people try to act like he's a serious, honest broker, House Republican in the House. But, of course, he's not. And here's further proof that he's not when Margaret Brennan does what she does pretty well. I think this clip is pretty self-explanatory about the appointment of people who should have nowhere any access to the intelligence community on the intelligence community.
But I want to ask you about the Intelligence Committee. You've tried to keep it nonpartisan, as you've said on this program. Speaker Johnson, though, recently decided, as you know, to add 2 congressmen, Scott Perry and Dr. Ronnie Jackson, to your committee, reportedly at the behest of Donald Trump. One of your members, Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan, referred to Perry as a threat to intelligence oversight. Quote, he will be on the very committee that oversees the FBI while he is directly under investigation by this very agency. Do you think that is a disqualifying conflict of interest?
Well, being concerned, obviously, about that issue and being the chairman, I contacted the IC to see whether or not there was an issue that, in due diligence from our committee that we needed to resolve or address. They indicated that there was not an ongoing or continuing issue or even a current issue that we needed to address.
The FBI
issue,
told you that.
I think, here that's most important, the IC told us that. I think what's very important here is that The Speaker makes this appointment, and then what he's done since. The Speaker has absolutely committed himself to these two individuals following the rules, not only the laws. Both of them have military experience. Both of them have had access to classified information before, and there's been no reports of any incidences of their mishandling of classified information. The Speaker has met with our committee, Republican members. He has spoken directly to Jim Himes. We've had a meeting with Mr. Perry, myself, and the Speaker, where all of these assurances have been made. But the Speaker has said this, that he is going to continue to monitor the situation. If there's any indication of anything improper happening, that he will intervene. And I believe the Speaker will assert leadership here.
And withdraw that nomination potentially. Well, look, Scott Perry has come out and took aim at you, as you know, because he said if he gets on this committee, he'll conduct actual oversight, not blind obedience to some facets of our intelligence community. And he claimed they're spying on the American people. How do you respond to that? He has apologized, and certainly those are the types of words that you would not want from somebody who's joining a committee that is obviously very dedicated to national security and very dedicated to working on a bipartisan way. I think.
All right, there you go. Mike Turner caught with his pants down, if you ask me. All right, let's go to, this is Congressman Byron Dorgan. He was on with Peter Alexander on Meet the Press, who asked him about the new tariffs and trade policies that the disgraced former president is rolling out. And of course, Byron Donalds could not defend it in any way, but he tries.
Floated the idea of getting rid of the federal income tax and replacing it with an all-tariff policy. Many economists say that that would help the rich and that it would hurt middle and lower income Americans. In 2021, Congressman, you praised America as a beacon for free and fair trade throughout the entire world. So wouldn't the president's idea hurt tens of millions of Americans?
Well, let me be direct about trade policy. For a lot of our country's history, trade policy has not been written to the best interests of the American people. A lot of these trade policies have favored foreign countries. I believe in free trade, but it has to be fair trade. The deals have to be equitable. The deals that were written in the past, previous administrations, were not equitable to the American people, to the American companies.
So Donald
that's
Trump's
the type
proposing
of thing that has to be shifted.
An all-tariff policy.
Now, hold on a second. Let me finish.
Yeah.
Let me finish. I'm going to come to the policy. Now, what I will say is that President Trump is thinking through all types of various policies to jumpstart our economy, to make sure that we have a flourishing and thriving America. It's an idea. It's not concrete yet. A lot of things have to be flushed out. I was in the room when this was brought up. I talked with several of my colleagues who understand tariff policy, trade policy, and tax policy in a lot more detail than I do. They said there's some merit to it, but there's some other things that have to be worked out. You also have to figure out how to deal with the taxation piece for people on the low end of the socioeconomic spectrum.
So to be clear, these are just ideas you're suggesting.
This isn't to protect all Americans.
This isn't a real proposal that he's looking to implement right now. We should note that under Donald Trump in his 4 years in office,
there are many ideas that the president is thinking through, all designed to make sure that America thrives and that the American people thrive.
The debt rose by $8.4 trillion when Donald Trump was in office. And also the Fed chair, who Donald Trump himself selected, has said this week that the economy is growing at a solid pace and we have a strong labor market.
There's Peter Alexander with the fact checking in real time. He did as good of a job as he could with that guest, Byron Donalds, who is another supporter of the disgraced former president who has spent a lot of time defending him, no matter what he says and does. And so do several others. Here's the former governor of North Dakota. What's his name? Doug Burnham, the guy with the eyebrows, who used to be embarrassed by Donald Trump. Now listen off his great qualities as a person.
In the last 6 months, because this guy is tireless, he's committed, he's smart, he's funny, he's nothing like he's portrayed in the press. And so if you asked me that same question today, I'd be like, absolutely, I would do business with him, because I mean, think about how successful he's been, whether it's whatever it is. I mean, whether it's in TV, real estate, politics, all the things that he's done, the guy knows how to get it done. And I think every American should be, we should be grateful that we've got someone who's willing, with that kind of talent from the private sector, that's willing to put himself back into the presidential race again.
All right. Yeah. Wow. There you go. Really, really flattering. Good job, Doug. I'm sure your family's super proud. So is Tim Scott's family. And Tom Cotton's family must be really ecstatic with him for putting so much support behind the disgraced former president himself. Here he is, the Arkansas senator. He was on State of the Union, it's called, on CNN with Jake Tapper.
I want to play something you told me the last time you were on the show, which was, believe it or not, September 2020, after Donald Trump, then the president, had just cast doubt on whether he would ultimately support the peaceful transfer of power should then Vice President Biden win. Take a listen. It's really quite alarming to a lot of Republicans, his refusal to say, of course, if I lose, I will abide by a peaceful transfer of power.
He's since said that if there's a clear winner, if this courts settle a contested election, that of course he will. But the premise of the question that you just played me, Jake, is the president's going to lose. I don't think the president's going to lose. The president is going to win.
It's a prediction that didn't age very well. Not only did President Trump lose, he did not accept the court-settled contested election, as you phrased it, or abide by the peaceful transfer of power.
Jake, first, I think I need to come on more often because there's a big difference between how we looked 4 years ago.
And you haven't aged. I have quite a bit. I have quite a bit, but yes.
But, Jake, I mean, I think the president has said, as I've said about this election. Of course, we will accept the results if the results are from fair and free elections. Every candidate in any race has a right to go to court to seek legal redress.
Of course.
If they think there's been any kind of fraud or cheating, if they think a state or a city didn't follow the rules or customary practices of their elections. I think that that's reasonable for President Trump to say. It's reasonable for any candidate for any office in America to believe.
I don't disagree, but that's not what happened in 2020. I mean, he contested it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and then it went past that, as you know.
Well, look, what happened on January 6, 2021 is that there was a protest in Washington that got out of hand and it became a riot. And as I've said from the very beginning, anyone who injured a law enforcement officer or committed acts of violence on January 6th at the Capitol should be prosecuted and face severe consequences. Again, that's unlike Democrats who won't prosecute violent protesters, for instance, from Democratic street militias outside the homes of Supreme Court justices or defacing statues of veterans right across from the White House. Anyone who commits acts of violence, in my opinion, should be prosecuted and face severe consequences.
All right, there you go, Tom Cotton. It should be mentioned that many of these guests are election deniers themselves, and yet they're still invited on, which, of course, we should all just be cognizant of and potentially take issue with. I think it's fair to say. All right, now here is a good piece of audio. I thought this was interesting, and a lot of people were sharing this. This is a King County executive in Washington State. His name is Dow Constantine. And yesterday he came out and told the truth about what the stats say regarding homelessness. He says it's not mental health or substance abuse or addiction that is the root cause of homelessness, but the housing market, a lack of housing. How about that? Listen to this 1 minute.
One widely held belief is that behavioral health issues like untreated mental health or substance use disorders are root causes of the homelessness crisis that we see all around us. This is wrong. University of Washington researcher Greg Colburn has shown that the cause of the homelessness phenomenon is not individual challenges, but a housing market failure. One factor distinguishing places with high homelessness from places with low homelessness is not the prevalence of addiction or untreated mental health problems or the availability of public assistance or the weather or even poverty. The one critical difference is whether there are enough housing units to match the number of people who need homes. If not, somebody, usually the person with the least money or the greatest burdens, loses out.
Well, how about that? An argument with data, and I would love to know what people think. That's definitely an interesting and important issue that we should be talking about more about, that people get scapegoated on addiction and all kinds of other issues for why they're homeless. And it's because nobody can afford a house. How about that? All right. Well, moving on. One more clip I want to play for you. It's like 3 minutes. I kept the whole thing. I just like this commentary from Jen Psaki about President Biden and his sons and his life. And I don't know, maybe it's too much of a kiss ass because Jen Psaki, of course, was his former spokeswoman. But I watched it and I thought it was thoughtful and a good piece of audio commentary that I wanted to share with you. So here it is right now from MSNBC this weekend.
It was late February of 2019, and Joe Biden was preparing to run for president. Nearly 4 years had passed since he lost his oldest son, Beau, to cancer, prompting him to delay his expected campaign. But with just 2 months before launch, the campaign was not the first thing on his mind. It was his son, Hunter. Good morning, my beautiful son. I miss you and love you, Dad. Those are the words not of a presidential candidate embarrassed by his son's drug addiction, not at all. Rather, they're a heartfelt expression of his devotion, even as he faced the most important challenge of his professional life. Look, Hunter's addiction is not a secret. He literally wrote an entire book about it, readily admitting that for 4 years, his entire life revolved around doing drugs and making arrangements to buy drugs. And while his downward spiral came with the pain and grief of losing his only brother, he never used that tragedy as an excuse. And he knows his addiction, as anyone who's faced it does, is a battle he will face for the rest of his life. Hunter Biden is one of nearly 50 million Americans who struggles with substance abuse every year in this country, which also means that Joe Biden is one of millions of fathers who has felt the ripple effect of addiction. And on this Father's Day, Joe Biden's love for his son and how he's handled everything since the verdict really tells us more about his character as a human being than almost anything else. I mean, this week was one of the harder weeks for the Biden family. And I say harder and not hardest because of the tremendous losses they've experienced over the years. The most profound loss, of course, came in 1972, when Joe Biden's first wife and baby daughter were killed in a devastating car crash just before Christmas, just days before he was first sworn in as a senator. Then there was the loss of Beau Biden, who was just 46 years old when he died from brain cancer. And now, his only remaining son has been found guilty on 3 felony charges, all stemming from decisions he made while at his lowest depths. And despite the obvious pain and heartbreak of that verdict, President Biden has reacted not with outrage, but acceptance.
With regard to the question regarding the family, I'm extremely proud of my son, Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know. And I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I'd abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
I can't emphasize enough from knowing him how hard that second half must have been for him to say. I mean, Joe Biden is a person who answers his phone every time any of his grandchildren call, anytime, doesn't matter what's going on. He does the things your grandparents do. When they pretend you drop money on the floor just so you have $20 in your pocket and they say, did you drop something? He's deeply in love with his wife. I mean, deeply. His family, with all the pain and anguish that surrounded it, is his heart. But Joe Biden's character as a public servant is what drove him to make clear that the law applies to everyone. His decision not to pardon his son is not an expression of restraint or removal in any way from what his son has gone through and is continuing to go through, but of principle. Because the justice system that convicted his only surviving son is the same justice system he's vowed to protect. And if that doesn't tell you who Joe Biden is, I don't really know what does.
Well, there you go. Jen Psaki, I thought that was very thoughtful and thought-provoking and sincere, and hopefully you liked it. Now let's finally get to some comedy for you, huh? The comedy today comes from our guest today. He is, after all, a hilarious comedian. Nobody does better impressions than him. He did a very funny Trump Father's Day video that he shared widely on all of his social media networks. This is, of course, a disgraced former president talking about his attraction to his daughter. It's pretty sick, but also, I think, pretty funny. Here it is.
This is a special video for a wonderful daughter on Father's Day. Ivanka, you know, I've never even really acknowledged the existence of Tiffany, and I don't even know the names of my other kids, and certainly not my grandkids. But you've always held a special place in my heart, in my pants, especially my pants, because that's where I keep my photo of you in my wallet, which I get emotional, but I tuck it into my underpants because I want you close to me. And that's where you started, darling. That's where you started, right in my underpants. And you blossomed after I had strong Christian sex with your mother, Ivana. We made you, and, you know, 2 years old, 4 years old, I had no idea if you would be a sexy, beautiful woman. But by the time you were 9, I knew. I could just see it. I could see the way my businessmen friends looked at you, and I could see that you were going to be hot. Now, we made some improvements in your teenage years and your early 20s, and, I'm not asking for a refund, certainly, because the job was well done. But for Father's Day, this sacred day between us, could you send me some of the bikini shots from your vacation? That's all I want.
All right. I know my mom is groaning at that, and maybe some of you others are as well, but I thought it was hilarious. I love everything he does, and I was very happy he was able to talk to me. On Sunday, go visit jlcauvin.com and go stream his special, Half Blackface, on Amazon Prime. Write a review of it. Listen to his podcasts, which are so good. Rain on Your Parade is really one of my favorite things to listen to, and Making Podcasts Great Again, absolutely hilarious. See him coming up in D.C. He will be in Washington, D.C. at the Comedy Loft, and you can see him on June 28th and 29th at the D.C. Comedy Loft. And, jlcomedy.com, jlcauvin.com for more. Let's do it right now. Another brilliant, thought-provoking conversation with JL Cauvin. All right, now I've got him, and you've just heard his disgusting comedy. And I hope that was a hit. I hope that your weird having to put yourself in Trump and his daughter's shoes character wasn't too much for people.
Well, I hope not. It's, I go through a lot psychologically to, embody the man. So I hope people appreciate all this art that I've vomited forth over the years.
Oh, it's so good. You're the best. Thank you very much for joining me, for pinching in, and I appreciate you. I know that you have to, probably a lot of people, my daughter was just telling me this, watch the Game of Thrones prequel is beginning tonight, I guess. I don't want to talk.
Season 2.
Season 2, episode 1. So a lot of people are talking about that. You're very excited. People are excited. I don't know what to say. Enjoy.
It's HBO. They didn't create the must-watch TV sort of thing, but it's the last thing that's sort of timed to a certain, a communal sort of thing that HBO shows have still remained. Sunday, 9:00, if it's one of the big ones, a lot of people watch it. And the Game of Thrones, they hit a wide cross section, I think, of people. So it's fun, and also I just want to watch it as soon as possible, because as soon as you click open your phone instinctively or to look at something else, you'll be like, so-and-so got murdered in the first 10 minutes. And you're like, great.
Right. Yeah, you can't. It'll be nothing but spoilers. Okay. Well, that's very, I wish I liked that show, or a show like that, because I do miss the communal watching experience, but you also don't want anything to be given away. Well, enjoy that for all of those of you that
and I do humorous recaps on my Patreon it'll be every Monday morning as the season goes on.
Oh, great.
Last season I did funny recap episodes. They're spoiler full, obviously, so you got to watch it first. But just another plug for my nonsense.
Also, Father's Day over the weekend. You're not a father, but to your dog Cookie, and but you put out a very funny picture of you when you were a baby with your family. What do you want to say to all the dads out there, and about your dad, if anything?
Oh, happy Father's Day to you, Pete. I would say, or day after when people are listening to this. No, I think, what I would say, and this will sound a little mushy or whatever, but I think I really took for granted the presence of my dad in my life, and the fact that he never seemed to have, it wasn't until he was gone, he passed away in 2017, and through therapy and things where I'm examining and going, oh, he really he did right by me in many ways, in terms of his problems were never my problems. Do you know what I mean? In other words, I think sometimes, not to throw sometimes my mom can be overwhelmed and can kind of project her own issues onto, sure. But my dad kind of kept a balance. And honestly, being a comedian and getting into middle age, and you talk about men's issues and friendship issues and things like that, and that was very big a few years ago for you especially, you just take for granted, oh, that was somebody who loved me. That's not here anymore. And you sort of, as a parent, you're a parent, I'm not, but I'm sure that's what you want. You want your kids to be able to sort of take for granted, in a certain healthy way, take for granted that they can always understand, oh, my dad loves me. He's there. He's there for me. He loves me. there's something about that. You don't want to take it for granted, but as a parent, I would imagine you almost want your daughters to take it for granted because it speaks to a level of safety, comfort, and conditioning. Like, oh yeah, my dad's there for me. Like, I don't have to, the sun rises, you know, the I breathe in and out. My parents are there for me. And if you're lucky enough to have parents that are just there for you, it can be easy to take it for granted. But once he was gone, I was just sort of like, oh wow, somebody like, you know, one of the handful of people in this world who loved me is not here.
Right.
And so I would just say, without being too mushy, just, you know, maybe reflect on that if you still have your parent or parents, and, you know, be mindful of that, because it's good that you can take it for granted sometimes because it will speak to the safety and the love that they provide, but don't always take it for granted. If it's, you know what I mean? Especially as an adult, if you still have them, just sort of say, oh man, like, yes, I'm very thankful. And obviously a day like Father's Day, these Hallmark holidays can sometimes be very easy to just add to the taking for granted. Like, oh, we took them for dinner and we said, hey, Dad, you have the day to yourself. But sometimes it's good maybe to actually reflect on it in a real way, you know, and then treat them like shit
That's
on Monday.
That's exactly what I've been doing. Yeah. I think that's great advice. I love that. I love that response. It's great to hear that your reflection on your dad, and just that reminder, you know, segueing into a lot of dads are bad. There are bad dads, obviously.
Right.
And I think most parents are complex. There's good, there's bad, there's things that, you know, that are well-intentioned, things backfired, all those things. But then
if you're a bad daddy, that's actually in some communities a good thing.
Right. Or sugar daddy.
Yeah.
There's, yeah, right. Bad daddy. Well, so Donald Trump, like, he's a bad father, right? Like, do you know him and his biography well enough? You've done impressions of his son. You basically embody his whole family. He seems like someone who doesn't care about anybody but himself, and he proved that, you know, over and over to us. And yet some people still aren't buying it. But I wonder what his Father's Day is like. He's empty, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he likes maybe getting a car and like praise. If he gets praise, I'm sure that feels good. But that he's not somebody who's like, oh, fine, it's nice to feel appreciated. It's like any day he goes by that if he goes by any day that doesn't feel like Father's Day, he's like, what happened? So, you know what I mean? So I just think it's funny, like the stories I've read about Don Jr., I find obviously everybody knows the creepiness with Ivanka, which is just truly tasteless at best and incestuous at worst. But Don Jr. is an interesting case because Don Jr. is much closer, from what I've read, to a true Republican than Donald Trump is. His son was, liked hunting, real deal hunting, not just, and I'm not a fan of hunting, I'm just saying, he didn't adopt that as a political thing. He found community in sort of the right-wing alpha male type guys. He wanted to join the military.
Found a love thirst.
Yeah, a masculine love, a perception of masculine love that he clearly didn't get. He didn't talk to his father for several years because, you know, before the goodness could maybe be stomped out of his adolescent heart, he was disgusted that his father had like publicly cheated on his mother. That's a good moral response to how his father treated his mother. I had read that he considered joining the military. Once again, I think this is him maybe, you know, finding that life appealing, finding that surrogate masculinity appealing. And Trump had said, and I forget where I read this, in a reputable thing, it wasn't like a tweet from some random person, it was like an article, that he had said he'd disown him if he joined the military, which of course is one of those things. How does the military that back Trump feel about that? Right? You know, just like, but they don't care about the suckers and losers comment that John Kelly said. So why would they care if he didn't want it? They'd say, well, of course, Donald Trump's such a good father. It's understandable he would want to protect his son from. He like slapped his kid, Don Jr., in front of his like college classmates at Penn. This was in an article I read. He is, I mean, from Donald Jr. being named Donald Jr., that story when Ivana said he didn't want to name him Donald Jr. in case he was a loser. That's what you're thinking about like a baby? No, it's really like he is he is a bad dude, and it translates to, because parenting, from what I see, is a grind. And one thing Donald Trump doesn't do is grind. Like, he'll show up to the "It's a Boy" cigar handout. He likes that part of parenting. And then he'll like go away. I have a joke on Making Podcasts Great Again, a running joke, which is whenever I'm giving father parenting advice to like my co-host, who's a father of two, I'll say, what you basically have to do is you have to succeed and disappear for 10, maybe 15 years. And you set a good example of success. And then when they're old enough to work for you, they say, oh, I want to work for him. Look how successful he is. Okay. You know, and it's like, he's not there for the grind on any of these things. Right. It's why he likes tariffs rather than complicated economic policy. Tariffs, money, give me money, bad. And parenting, it's the same thing. I'm sure he likes walking in and some guy going, oh, a son, or, oh, your daughter's beautiful. He loves that. Everything else, he's not here for any of the other stuff.
Great psychoanalysis. And I just found the article that I'm sure there's many references. Trump said he would disown Don Jr. if he joined the army, according to a book by the president's brother, Robert Trump, telling Mary Trump. The book's author is Mary Trump.
Oh, God. Yeah. Okay. So that's where I
don't know if
I forget the title of it, but I read that. Yeah.
He's mocked the U.S. military his whole life. Let's see what else is happening in the campaign. Obviously, did you see? I mean, there's going to be debates in 11 days. You've seen the controversy with Joe Biden wandering off and the edited clips and so on.
Right.
This weekend there was a big fundraiser with the Hollywood types, the Jimmy Kimmels and the George Clooney's and the Julia Roberts.
I missed my invite.
You did not get invited. What did you think? Any thoughts on the campaign? 11 days away from debate number one. Is it going to happen? And why?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it will happen. And I am feeling, and I don't know if you had seen this because you had reached out to me. I didn't know if you had seen, I had a tweet blow up a couple days ago. It got like 1.4 million views. Shit. So I was like, hell yeah.
What was this?
It was basically me complaining about progressives not wanting to vote for Biden, and the whole pattern repeating itself of like, I don't like this or I don't like that. And it's like, at some point people have to realize it's a binary choice. And I'm
too boring and condescending. I'm not excited about Jon Carroll. Hillary Clinton isn't likable. Yes. That's how you got 5 hard right Supreme Court justices, the Iraq War, the Great Recession, a deepened climate crisis, an awful response to COVID, loss of abortion and voting rights, and an insurrection at the Capitol. But sure, if Joe Biden isn't for you, I'm sure there won't be any bad consequences. Wow, yeah, I did not see that tweet. 1.3 million views. Whew.
Yeah, it was because, and I think Biden will have a good debate performance. I have a good feeling about it because I think the Republicans can't help themselves but lower the bar. Like, one of the advantages Trump used to have is kind of like, he's not if he just shows up and is okay against Hillary, which he wasn't, but it didn't really matter. But the bar, the Republicans keep lowering the bar for Joe Biden, which only helps Joe Biden. Donald Trump, and I've compared the two. I said, Joe Biden is like your grandpa forgetting a name. You know, like, what are your friend's name? Timmy, Tommy, Tammy. You're the guy, the friend. You know him. He was at the house. Donald Trump is like sundowning. Like he's like, he sometimes his mind really seems to be like not making connections, and he's just talking. But for some reason, people are like, but look at the energy. Like, if Donald Trump, if Biden stumbles over a word, he's losing it. But if Donald Trump, throws his feces at a woman and tells her, like, you're trying to kidnap me, they'll go, look at that energy. Look at that toughness. It's like, this guy is losing it. Yeah. Just more aggressively. Somehow we're giving him more credit for like the bells and whistles of dementia. And I think Biden will do well in the debate, and I think it's set up to do well for him. They cut the mic. There's no audience to play to. Trump is either overconfident or bluffing, and his bluff got called. But I think he's going to be. I think Biden will do fine. I know he looks old and he presents old, but I made a joke on Rain on Your Parade recently where I said, yeah, but can't we think of him as like Gandalf old, like Lord of the Rings Gandalf old, not necessarily old, like done for? Can't he still have some of the wisdom, even if he moves with a cane kind of thing? But I can't help but be a little aggressive and condescending towards some of the far left, especially because I know there are some people with genuine, heartfelt, deep issues with Gaza and with Biden in general. But to me, it's, if you can't get behind, I mean, this idea, and I made this point in a blog I wrote, which is like, well, if Trump gets in office, it will almost certainly be, if there's any room to be worse for the people of Gaza, if there's any room for all issues that progressives care about, climate, Gaza, guns, voting, underrepresented minorities, gay rights or LGBTQ rights, whatever the issue, it's going to be worse. And what I would say to the honest, heartfelt, very left-wing people is, how many additional lives make your righteous stand worth it? Like when Donald Trump says to Bibi Netanyahu, take the gloves off, you're not going to get any pushback from me. When he rips open as many oil wells as possible and stops giving subsidies for electric cars and stuff, how many additional lives that we know Donald Trump will cause? How many women being forced into birth, like to give birth? How many of these things add up until you say, you know what, I do need to choose what I believe to be the lesser of two evils?
I feel like there should be a better language around describing who you're talking about, because when you say, and plenty of people say,
and these might be left-wing Twitter warriors who wouldn't vote either way.
Hear me out. What I'm saying, like hard left or extreme left, like that's me. I'm all the way to the left on every single issue. But what you're talking about is someone who says, I cannot vote for Joe Biden because of this issue, specifically because of Gaza or some other one issue. And the difference is there should be language around, you know, the kind of pragmatism, the practicality of how things get done. You certainly learn working, getting older, working in an organization or doing local politics or any kind of governance, that no matter what you believe, what is right, it's very hard. You got to convince a lot of other people. You got to bring people over here, and you got to get them to vote. And it just can't make gay marriage legal overnight. It just didn't happen overnight. We had to fight, and we had to fight, and we had to fight, and whatever the issue is. And so I just feel like I'm all the way to the left, but I live in reality, and I understand the practicality and pragmatic nature that is all politics, much less all progress in yourself, much less at your company. Is there anything to that?
Oh, there absolutely. And I try, at least with friends, maybe I could be nicer with strangers, but I have friends who hate the Clintons, voted for Hillary Clinton. And I donated to Bernie Sanders in 2016. I was pretty sure I was going to vote for Hillary Clinton, but I donated to Bernie Sanders because I liked what he was saying. I liked him pushing things a little, especially economically, to the left, which he did. And to me, it becomes a sort of all or nothing struggle for a lot of people. And I think there is some lack of understanding of civics, because I say to people all the time, I go, FDR, let's go the last 100 years, FDR, LBJ, and the first 2 years of Obama getting Obamacare. All three of those presidents had large legislative majorities.
No, you're absolutely right. The civics, that's a fair ignorance for people to have up to a certain point. But when you starts to animate you and you're so irate and angry and you don't understand how the filibuster works.
What has Biden done? What has Biden done? And I go, what Biden did, in my opinion, in those first 2 years with a 0-seat majority in the Senate was incredibly impressive.
Yeah. Thread a needle. And really thread a tough needle.
And I look at that and I would say to somebody, he has been moved to the left on issues. Yeah. If you gave him, and the problem is, of course, the way the Senate is set up is a structural problem. But if you found a way to 50 non-Manchin Sinema senators, 50, and you got rid of the filibuster, even if you carve it out, and Mitch McConnell, if he lives till 100, we'll reverse it on them. But you know what? Strike first. This is one of those things where it's you strike first because this is not a party. The Republicans are not a party acting in good faith.
Yeah.
You get 50 plus Kamala Harris of non-Manchin cinema and maybe like Tester. And I don't mean, we need Tester, but he may not be a guy willing to give this up.
Yeah.
The old blue dog Democrats who sort of hindered Obamacare.
No, hold on a second. Again, it's the practicality of Montana politics. It's not that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh, no. And that's why Joe Manchin, for all my problems with him, I'm just saying we got to get 3 more in other states. But if Joe Manchin is the 50th vote deciding between whether Democrats control the Senate or not, I'm all for Joe Manchin rather than a Republican replacement in West Virginia. But I think voting rights, I think you had like probably 47 or 48 votes to get rid of the filibuster on that issue. And when I read the book Tyranny of the Minority, which was by the same authors who wrote When Democracies Die from like 2018.
Is that Tim Snyder?
No, it's 2 guys. It's like Levitt and Levitsky or something. They were both bestsellers, but if you look them up, When Democracies Die was their first one, and then Tyranny of the Minority. And they make the argument that majority should rule, except in really 2 cases. And that's what makes us sort of a Republican form of government and a representative democracy. You can't have tyranny of the majority. Hey, we don't like gay people. We want slaves. Hey, the majority voted for it. They say individual rights and democratic processes, voting rights are the 2 places where you have to protect the minority. But what's happened now is we have minority rule in so many ways because structurally the Constitution doesn't really work anymore for the way our population is distributed. And Republicans now know they're just going to double down on this because they know that's the only thing keeping them with a shot. Electoral college is the only thing that gives them a shot at the presidency now. It's the Senate is the only thing that gives them a chance of stifling progress and democratic power. So they have all these fixes that seem unrealistic, but getting rid of the filibuster and then at least for voting rights and passing various sort of like structural changes to make the democracy more democratic. And I say that to people and I go, that isn't everything. You can write off constitutional amendments, unfortunately.
Right.
Ain't happening.
Right.
It's not happening. But this could happen if you really can just get to like 53 senators. Then all of a sudden, oh, wait, yes, the Republicans will be furious that we're enhancing democracy, which should, to a person paying attention, raise your eyebrow and go, wait, why do these guys hate when more people vote? But it's not working so far. The Republicans are like, yeah, it's cheating when they vote.
What do you think of the argument that is now being made by a lot of folks on the right? It's been made for years. I think Will Cain made it to me years ago, that we're not a democracy. We are a representative republic and democratic republic. And I think that people don't quite understand the nuance there and why it matters. But my argument would be, well, look at every goddamn Republican president. Every one of them, Bush, Reagan, and Bush, recent times, they all made these soaring speeches about spreading democracy around the world. Right. What do you think they were talking about? What do you think we have? And they just don't understand our current system, much less the history of democracy, much less the campaigns to spread democracy around the world that overwhelmingly probably failed for all kinds of different reasons. What do you think of that argument and how to handle it when so many Americans don't understand that part of how our system works?
Well, it's a very convenient sort of last ditch effort to be like, no, don't change anything because we're a representative, we're a republic, not a democracy. And to me, I still sort of think, yeah, the states can do what they want to a certain extent, but ridiculous filibuster, ridiculous gerrymandering, suppressing rights of people to vote, making it incredibly difficult for people to vote. Mm-hmm. That's where we need the federal supremacy to step in and go, no, you get to have your fiefdom as a state. We understand, even though I think in many cases it's a little antiquated, this idea of like, no, the founders cared about states much more we might care about a state culturally now, but then it was political power. Like I'm a Virginian. I am not an American. I'm a Virginian and I'm willing.
responsible for so much more. It should have a different conversation. But go ahead.
I'm willing to, it was almost like I'm a Virginian, but I'm willing to join your club called the United States. We're now Americans, as everybody always loves saying. We're Americans. Maybe Texas is an exception to this, to be honest. I think there's a lot of like, I'm a Texan. And I almost kind of would respect that because I feel like that really is ingrained in their culture. But everybody else is not like, I'm an Ohioan, man. I'm a Buckeye. Get out of here with your tyranny, your federal tyranny trying to take over my Buckeye state. Nobody really seems to talk like that. And I think, but it's a convenient excuse. It's like a semantic excuse to be like, hey, we're not what you think we are. We're not a democracy. And I go, every generation seems to have enhanced democracy, though. When they made a direct election of senators, that was a move to make things more democratic.
Yep.
And yet presidency, because it's the last fucking hope for Republicans to hold on to the presidency. So no. Actually, we're states. We're states. And we have to keep this system that gives us a chance in hell of capturing power. Because if it was a popular vote, they'd have to modulate what the fuck they do. And they don't want to. So, and that'd be interesting if we had popular vote. How quickly, not quickly, but how we might see a real shift. Because then a Nikki Haley, if you want to use her as an example, could make the argument like Donald Trump's never won the popular vote. We're putting up a guy who's going to lose a third time. And people would have to look at the math and go, that's kind of right. Like he probably is going to lose again. Why are we doing a 3-time loser? And I love the fact that Trump potentially this year, win or lose the Electoral College, could be a convicted, a 34-time felon, twice impeached, 3-time popular vote loser. Like that's like the negative Ric Flair mantra. Ric Flair is always talking about all the things he has, and Donald Trump's like, I got 34 indictments, 2 impeachments, and it's pathetic. It would be pathetic for this country. It was already pathetic to have him as president once. So.
You have a recent episode of Rain on Your Parade about the WNBA. I'm loosely following what's happening there because of the cultural issues, obviously a women's pro league, and then you've got all these racial overtones now. And I don't know how much I want to talk about it, but I would love, and maybe I should just listen to that episode, but maybe give us a preview of
Cornel West is my guest on that episode. He does like about 20 minutes on it.
Cornel West weighs in on the WNBA situation? Oh, that should be good.
Goatee, fro, sunglasses,
wow. Okay.
A lot of gesticulating.
Wow.
So you might want to watch that. That's a YouTube recommended.
Got it. Is there a way to explain what you think the controversy is, and is it clear cut or is it a bit?
I think what I had said to somebody recently is I think it is 40%, not for the WNBA, not the external factors where I think race is a much bigger factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot of it is she's a hyped up rookie, and the double-edged sword is she is bringing more eyeballs to the league, which is going to eventually raise people's paychecks, endorsements. Caitlin Clark, Caitlin Clark. Her high profile is undoubtedly bringing way more eyeballs and money to the sport. So that's going to benefit everybody. But to a star player in the WNBA or a fellow elite rookie, I think you look at that, and before it even gets to race, I think there can be a little bit of like, well, she's not, they're acting like she's the best player in the league. And that's an insult to the sort of top 10 elite players who've been doing the work there and are stars in their own right. So I think a lot of it is more like, yes, it's good, but at the same time, it's like, I don't want to cede the spotlight to this rookie who's not as good as me yet. And so I think there's a lot of tension and sort of welcome to the league kind of stuff that is not necessarily racial, but maybe a little bit of it is. But I think what's happened outside, I'm expecting Caitlin Clark to get invited to speak at the GOP convention at this point, not because of her politics, but because it's becoming so quickly a cultural issue, which is unfortunate. I think it will help the league, though.
It also, I didn't mention, apparently sexuality is obviously a huge issue. There's been comments about it's a black lesbian league, or that it's a lot of gay women in general. And Caitlin Clark is a white, straight woman who's, I think she's known to be dating a guy or something. Everybody knows she's.
Yeah, but I mean, this is just from my one idea is like, if she's not an ugly person, she's a very tall, sort of plain person to me.
There you.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying the idea that she's coming in and it's like, oh, I could be wrong, and I'm not Madison Avenue. I don't know how the ad dollars move. I didn't have any clue what her sexuality was in college. And if I'm being honest, I might have almost just been like, is she, I might have defaulted to, is she gay? Not that I would have known either way or cared, but I didn't get an idea of like, hey, now I'm interested because look at this hot straight woman. Finally,
right.
something
okay,
like,
but the point I'm saying,
I feel like that might be a little bit of demographic piling on. Like, it's like, oh, they hate her because she's this and she's this and she's this.
But it wasn't about Caitlin Clark. It was about just the idea that the WNBA is a league that gets criticized because of their women and because there's a lot of gay women. But let's move on. I'm done talking about women without any women here. But you should listen to that episode because...
Well, on Father's Day, I think it's perfectly acceptable for men to talk about whatever they want.
Oh, all right. Then let's go back to talking about women. I think ladies should... I want to ask you about the Supreme Court. It's June. These decisions are coming down like hellfire from Thanos' sky machines. It's really upsetting. And Thanos said he would rain fire.
He had a sky machine?
Well, he said rain fire, and they started firing.
I thought he just did this, and then everything disappeared.
It snapped, and everything disappeared, but then later on. So it's real bad in June. The Supreme Court, it's me talking about TV and films. It's a whole other podcast. Just a guy struggling, like he's got a head injury. And the Alito flag stuff, the corruption of Clarence Thomas, and just the overt religiosity in their judgments and speeches. Like, one thing I saw about those secret recordings, and I keep mentioning this, is Mark Joseph Stern over at Slate, who covers the Supreme Court. He's like, forget those secret recordings. Just go watch what he said publicly at his speech at Notre Dame. Like, just go look at his actual decisions where he quotes like a guy who was, burning witches. So what are your thoughts on what's happening right now in this month and the news around the corruption of Alito and Thomas particularly?
Well, didn't the GOP just block like an ethics bill?
Oh,
I thought the GOP...
Did you take a vote on it? I didn't even, let me see.
I thought they blocked it. Yeah, if you can look at that up. I think, as bad, I think what we're encountering is as bad
you're right,
as...
they did. U.S. Supreme Court ethics bill blocked in Senate.
Which, not to bring it back to the left, but it's sort of like we allowed the GOP to steal a Supreme Court seat. Like, they did that before the election in 2016. And the GOP voted like it mattered. You know what I mean? Like, they said, we're voting for Trump.
Did we allow them to steal the Senate seat? The Supreme Court seat? I don't think we allowed them. I don't think there was anything. Maybe the Senate could have done.
No. I'm saying we allowed it as voters. I'm saying we had a chance to say, oh, no. You can't steal a Supreme Court seat from our democratically elected president. And then we voted like we didn't give a shit. And Republicans voted like, we have a chance to steal a Supreme Court seat. You goddamn right I'm voting for Trump.
Yep.
And Trump, whether through his own instincts or advisors, played that up. And they cared more. And to me, this is another one of these issues where it's like, hey, Joe Biden and company, and this is an issue that does require amplification and messaging. Sometimes I think it's the fault of the voters where they go, the messaging was bad. I'm like, the economy's doing great. Read the fucking paper or look at the news or read, like, it's going great. Like, I don't know why Joe Biden, and then they say, oh, should Joe Biden brag about that? And then you're like, somehow Democrats are always caught in this, kind of like, be humble, don't brag about anything. But if you don't brag about it, your messaging sucks. And with this, the GOP voting against an ethics bill for the Supreme Court seems like, why would they do that? Like, let's make that a thing where it's like, they don't even care if judges are corrupt or not. Like, that's the language. I feel the GOP is endorsing judicial corruption. That's the messaging. We wanted to pass a bill. This isn't a Democrat judge or a Republican judge. We want Supreme Court judges from Ketanji Brown Jackson to Clarence Thomas and all the other non-black ones to vote, to have ethics. And the GOP says, no, we don't want that. They are pro-judicial corruption. And let them fight. And then at least you've put it in terms, because for some reason the left, because we're a bigger group, doesn't seem to give a fuck about like the courts, but then are very quickly going to complain when the court does something that Biden should have stopped that, or Democrats let that happen. And to me, Alito and Thomas, and as Professor Siegel has said, Alito strikes me as the world's most interesting man. He's the world's most miserable man. Dos Equis, stay miserable. But they are awful. And I would actually, if Biden had the votes, I would say get a judicial ethics package and tear this shit up. Go full bore on judicial reform and adding judges, term limits. I'm talking the whole thing. Fuck them. Because A, it's right, and B, get the power and then wield it. And I don't think Joe Biden has not, I think he has accomplished things and done things when he has had the votes.
Right.
And I think a second term Joe Biden, I would love to see him just go full out like, I got 3 years left on the planet, Jack. We're going all in. But I think make it an issue like that. Like the GOP is pro corrupt judges. Don't even say judicial corruption. That might even be too flat. The GOP is pro corrupt judges. They want their judges are taking bribes. Their judges are turning our court into a hypocritical church. Like but I think the GOP is pro corrupt judges because it's a real problem. And I think the fact that they have proven, like Trump, especially Thomas, Alito's an asshole and like wearing his opinions on his sleeves. And that's bad judicial behavior. That's not becoming of a judge, let alone a Supreme Court judge. And it's improper. But Thomas is just flat out corrupt. And I always thought the idea of like, in a way, you don't want your Supreme Court to need a code, a prescribed code to tell them how to do, because you want to think of them as almost judicial deities. Right. What they are here because they are beyond reproach. Their talent, their scholarship, their ethics. It almost is unbecoming for them to have a code of ethics. I get that philosophically. We're past that point now. We have corrupt scumbags laughing in our faces on the court. So we have the day of the judge as sacred arbiter of the Constitution is gone. Right. So let's put it in writing. And from here on out, trust but verify, as Reagan said of the Russian proverb. Instead, we're here like, don't trust. And I'm indignant that you even, said anything. And it's pathetic.
That's exactly how they're handling it. Yeah, that's how John Roberts and others seem to be.
And Roberts, I mean, I expected more from him. I know he has his certain things like the voting rights. He's always been like very bad on that as a young lawyer. But, I still think his vote on Obamacare was a compromise to try to save the court from looking too political, because I think he should have just approved it on interstate commerce, but he approved it as like a tax. Right. And I think that was a compromise to just sort of like, no, we're not political. Look, I'm saving the court from being too political. Right. But how the Roberts Court is going to be, it's going to be known as the court where like, fucking 19th century corruption made a comeback. Like, you know what I mean? Like how is he not thinking of that? Well, how is he not? Because he is a legacy guy. He is mindful of that.
He doesn't have the numbers. That's how.
And what I would say is the same thing I say to some of these like fucking, what I would say to, we brought this up before, like the Ted Cruzes of the world, where it's like, he insulted your wife. What are you doing? Like, what is your stop? What is your, I've had enough. If your wife and your father are not that, then you have no point. And with Roberts, it's like, I think he does care about the reputation of the court. Even if he is a pretty hard right guy, he's got to know. And you know what? Do something. And I don't know what the thing is. Is it a speech? Is it encouraging? I mean, there's a separation of powers issue in terms of like, I don't think you just be like, hey, Congress, do something, but something something from his platform because he's just letting them piss on the court.
Let me just finally ask you before you go, the Pope met with a whole bunch.
Yes, I have shows in Washington, D.C. at the end of the month that I need people to go to, and I'd love people to review Half Blackface on Amazon Prime. If I think that's what you were going to ask, but maybe not.
It wasn't, but I'm glad that you answered another question I was going to ask you to save me time. The Pope had a bunch of Catholic comedians, and comedians come visit him. You're a Catholic comedian. You were not invited. It must have made you feel pretty inadequate.
It did. I didn't like it at all because I'm a pretty, outside of maybe Colbert and Gaffigan, I'm a pretty out there Catholic. I'm not one of these Easter and Christmas fellas. I've had a pretty good run. Nobody other than, me and Colbert are sort of equals when it comes to taking on Trump in the comedy world. He has a slightly bigger platform, but I'm just as vocal and aggressive. And I know Pope Francis is, other than his somewhat liberal use of the gay slur, is as progressive as the popes come. And I'm sure he's not a Trump fan. So I'm not. There are a lot of things people have said, oh, why are you still Catholic after all this? But I'll tell you what my breaking point might have been. Not being invited to the Catholic comedians gathering. That's the other stuff. Yeah. The other stuff, abuse and treatment of women, and the Native American schools in Canada, just to name a more another example from the 20th century. Yeah. But not inviting me to the Catholic Comedian Convention is really beyond the pale.
I thought that's what it would take, and I'm happy to hear it. Join us at our secular church.
Well, no, I'm not going. No, I'm just going to. This opens up an opportunity for me to go evangelical and start my political career.
Where are you on IVF?
Can I talk about IVF for a second?
You got time.
I actually find it interesting, this debate.
What debate?
Because within like the whatever convention was having this dilemma.
The Southern Baptist.
Yes,
the debate about whether or not a fertilized embryo is life.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And what I found interesting about it, just from a thought level, was, if the whole thing has been life begins at conception, I can see how this organization would be saying, in terms of a consistent philosophy, you can't do it. And I just like seeing where people's points are of disagreement, where it's like, a woman was quoted in the Times going, I love all 10 of my embryos. And I'm like, oh, she's just trying to get away with doing IVF. She doesn't love them. They're embryos. You don't love them. You love their potential. You love the fact that science has made this possible, that you could grow a family. Of course. You don't when they pull the embryos out of the freezer, you don't cuddle them and go, no, you like the potential of it. So I find it interesting philosophically to see the hardcore sticking to their guns, and then people going, I'm not sure I'm that hardcore, actually. I'm more hardcore when it comes to other people. I'm willing to be a strict doctrinaire person when it comes to the other people out there. But for me, I feel like I'm going to need a little IVF wiggle room here on the whole when life begins. Life begins when I say it does when it comes to these embryos.
I love that take as well as the rest of them. Thank you very much for joining me, and go watch the Game of Thrones now. Enjoy it. I appreciate it.
A great pleasure. Thank you, Pete.
Buddy. All right, there he goes, J.L. Cauvin. See him in Washington, D.C. at the Comedy Loft, June 28th and 29th. And, of course, subscribe to his podcasts. They are so good. Support him on Patreon. Subscribe to him on the Twitter and everywhere else, as well as go review and rent and stream his special. I said it all before. It's all in the show notes as his everyday's guests information to contact them. Thank them for being on the show. Write a review of this show. Write me a letter, standupwithpete@gmail.com about anything, and I will talk to you later. I'm supposed to be interviewing Jasmine Crockett this morning, if it's Monday, June 17th, and very excited about that, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. So hopefully I'll get that up for you later on today as well. That's all I've got for you right now. Thank you so much for your support and for listening, you bumblebees. Here at the end, here now is Jon Carroll singing us out as he does every day. JonCarroll.org. Buy this song. Take it away, John.
depends on light. You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour.